Just moments ago, I found something hidden in my own home, and it completely changes everything I thought I knew about the disappearance. I'm still reeling, heart pounding like a warning drum in my chest. The afternoon sun slanted through the lace curtains of my study, dust motes floating lazily in its golden beam, when I noticed the floorboard. I had been so absorbed in unpacking my late grandmother's library, boxes of leather-bound tomes, brittle newspapers dating back decades, that I didn't even register that the board beneath my feet was out of alignment until it shifted under my weight with a soft click. Curiosity propelled me onto my knees. I slid my fingertips under the warped edge and pried it up. Below, nestled in a shallow cavity carved into the subfloor, lay a battered leather-bound journal wrapped in oilskin. My pulse quickened. The name Clara Holloway was embossed faintly on the cover in curling gilt letters. Clara Holloway. The woman who vanished without a trace from this very house 50 years ago, leaving behind only unanswered questions and whispered rumors. I cupped the journal in my hands, its cover crackling like dry leaves. Everything changed the moment I brushed away the oilskin and exposed those gilded letters. The disappearance that had haunted the town of Marlowe's Edge, Clara's fate, had become my own. I retreated to my desk and flicked open the journal. The first page bore a neat spidery script. June 3rd, 1975. They call me Clara, but I wonder whether I'll ever be the same. A chill ran through me. The entry continued in Clara's intimate tone, describing the creaking corridors of the old Holloway estate, the hush of the parlor at midnight, and a promise made beneath a moonlit sky. My breath came fast. These were not the ravings of a frightened hermit. They were careful observations, lucid and precise. Over the next hour, I devoured half the journal's entries, each one plunging me deeper into Clara's world. She wrote of midnight conversations with someone she referred to only as the benefactor, and of strange visits by local officials who insisted on seeing her alone. She recorded snippets of overheard conversations, mentions of land deals, of dredging rights on the nearby river, of hush money delivered in plain white envelopes. And then, on July 17th, her handwriting turned shaky. July 17th, 1975. Tonight I heard them in the parlor. Harold and Councilman Bates, whispering about debts and secrets they can never afford to let surface. They've noticed my inquiries. I'm frightened, but I know I must see this through. If anything happens to me, let this journal tell the story they tried to bury. My hands shook so violently that I had to set the journal on the desk and rub my temples. The writing was unmistakably Clara's, and her last dated entry was clearly a call for help. It was impossible that the journal had stayed hidden these many years, buried in plain sight beneath the floorboards of a house that every caretaker had walked over. Whoever placed it there had meant it to be found eventually. I needed context. I spent the next 2 days immersed in local archives, microfilm at the county library, yellowing newspapers in cardboard boxes, and public records in brittle ledgers. Every scrap I found filled in fragments of Clara's story. Clara Holloway had been the only heir to the Holloway fortune, a line of shipbuilders and landowners tracing back to the town's founding. She inherited the estate at age 23, when her parents died mysteriously in a fire that consumed the family mansion. Harold Fenwick, a wealthy entrepreneur and rising political figure, had been Clara's closest friend, until their falling out in the spring of 1975. Rumor held that Fenwick coveted the Holloway land for its strategic frontage along the river. Councilman Elias Bates chaired the town council's zoning committee. He presided over the approval of several controversial developments on Holloway property in the weeks before Clara's disappearance. And the official record? Clara's disappearance was ruled a runaway case. No evidence of foul play, ran the bland verdict. The police file was thin, just an interview or two, some superficial inquiries, then closure. But Clara's journal hinted at something far more insidious, a calculated conspiracy to drive her away, to silence her before her revelations could expose the extent of political and corporate collusion. Even as I pieced it together, unease settled in my gut. Clara had been right to fear. If she had gone into hiding, her enemies had motive enough to hunt her down. What if the same forces still lingered? The Holloway estate had changed hands many times, falling into disrepair before I bought it. But Marlowe's Edge remained a small town where old loyalties ran deep, and old secrets never quite died. That evening, I carried the journal upstairs and locked it in my bedroom safe. Sleep eluded me. Shadows on the ceiling appeared to shift, and every creak of the old house sounded like footsteps. In the dark silence, her voice echoed, "If anything happens to me, let this journal tell the story they tried to bury." I resolved to follow Clara's trail, but I vowed to be more cautious. I contacted my friend Denise, an investigative journalist based in the city, and hinted at a big story. She agreed to help, as long as I kept her in the loop and promised not to do anything reckless. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, together, we could finally give Clara her voice back. During the next week, I returned to the house with renewed purpose. Armed with a flashlight and a small toolkit, I searched every nook and cranny. Behind a false wall in the cellar, I found a bundle of yellowed letters tied with a black ribbon. They were correspondence between Clara and an anonymous confidant identified only as M. The letters spoke of plans to expose Fenwick and Bates at a town meeting, of evidence stashed in a safe deposit box, and of a desperate pact. Should Clara disappear, M would carry the torch. I made photocopies of the letters and stashed the originals in the safe. The name M, was it a friend? A fellow victim? A member of some clandestine group? Clara's circle had been small and selective. I needed to find M if I wanted to understand the full story. Meanwhile, Denise scoured Fenwick's public records. She unearthed financial documents showing Fenwick's donations to Bates's campaign coincided with council votes favoring Holloway property development, deals signed just days before Clara's last known sighting. The pattern was unmistakable. Money changed hands, zoning laws were bent, and Clara was in the way. Then the warnings began. On a gray morning, I found the lock to my study forced open. Boxes were rifled through. The journal was gone, but the letters remained untouched. My heart sank. Whoever broke in didn't know I'd already moved the journal, unless someone watched me. That night, I thought I heard someone pacing in the hallway outside my bedroom. I crept to the door, flipped on the hallway light, empty. My pulse thundered so loudly I couldn't hear anything else. When I returned, known as a rational person, the walls seemed to close in. Fear is a potent motivator. I considered abandoning the investigation, closing the safe, shuffling out of town. But I couldn't. Clara's voice demanded justice, and now I was entangled. Denise arranged a clandestine meeting in a city cafe. We spread the photos and documents across the table. "This is explosive," she whispered, eyes bright with excitement. "But you need a source, someone who knew Clara personally." My mind raced back to the letters signed M. I showed them to Denise. She suggested we track any living person in 1975 whose first name began with M and who had ties to the Holloway estate. It was a long shot, but we had little else. Using census records and old directories, we narrowed the list to two: Margaret Maggie Easton, a housekeeper at the estate who was dismissed months before Clara disappeared, and Matthew Reed, a photographer who once collaborated with Clara on a local history book. I decided to visit Maggie Easton first, hoping her age might shield her from danger, if there was any left to fear. Maggie lived in a modest bungalow on the edge of town. When I knocked, a frail woman answered, surprise flickering in her roomy eyes when she saw the journal photos. "You found my Clara's words," Maggie murmured, voice cracking. She ushered me inside, where her small living room was lined with faded photographs. There, I saw a young Clara. A smiling woman in a simple summer dress, standing by the riverbank. Maggie led me to a seat. "I never thought anyone would care," she whispered. "They told me to get rid of those papers. Councilman Bates threatened me. but Clara was like a daughter. Maggie's confession was heartbreaking. She had hidden Clara's final letters and then been too frightened to reveal her secret when Clara vanished. She told me she'd be back, Maggie said, tears in her eyes. I believed her. But after the threat from Bates, I destroyed some letters and hid the rest, hoping she'd return. Clara's fate remained uncertain, but Maggie gave me a crucial clue. Clara had planned to meet her on a moonless night at the old boathouse by the river. It was the last place Clara visited, and where, Maggie feared, something terrible happened. That night, under a starless sky, I crept through wet reeds toward the decrepit boathouse. The air smelled of mildew and decay. The boards groaned beneath my weight. I pried open the door with the same toolkit I'd used to lift the attic floorboard. Inside, dust motes danced in my flashlight beam. On a battered wooden table, I found a rusted key tied to a torn page of Clara's journal. Beneath it, a trapdoor latch. My breath caught as I lifted the hatch. The darkness below was thick and suffocating. Clenching the key in my sweaty palm, I climbed down into the subterranean space. The cellar beneath the boathouse was surprisingly spacious. Stone walls glistened with moisture, and puddles reflected my flashlight beam. In the far corner, I saw a metal safe bolted to the wall. I knelt and tried the rusted key fit perfectly. Inside the safe lay a single item, a sealed manila envelope bearing Clara's elegant script. For my friend, should I fail. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a flash drive taped to a sheet of paper listing file names, transactions, names, dates, audio recordings. Clara's final evidence. I pocketed the drive and scrambled up the ladder, heart pounding. As I emerged into the night, I heard footsteps on the dock above. A flashlight beam sliced through the darkness. Someone had followed me. I ducked behind a piling just as a figure stepped into view, silhouetted against the river's dark surface. "Who's there?" a gruff voice called. I pressed my back against the piling, stifled a gasp, and watched the beams sweep past. Then footsteps receded. My pulse thundered, limbs shaking with adrenaline. I knew then. I was in far deeper than I'd imagined. Clara's enemies still guarded their secrets. I waited until dawn to meet Denise again. In her makeshift office, a corner of her apartment piled with notebooks and coffee mugs, we inserted the flash drive into her laptop. Files opened in rapid succession, spreadsheets showing money funneled from Fenwick's accounts into Bates's offshore holdings, scanned letters admitting hush money payments, audio clips of late-night phone calls between Fenwick and an unidentified accomplice. One audio file caught my breath. Clara's voice, recorded on a portable tape recorder, confronts someone in the dark. "Clara," voice trembling, "Harold, you said you cared for me. Why are you doing this?" "Harold," angry whisper, "you're a threat, Clara. You always were. This town will be mine." Her gasp, then silence. The tape ended. Clara's final moments were immortalized in her own voice. I felt as if I'd found her ghost. We compiled a dossier, documents, photos, transcripts, and I contacted a trusted attorney recommended by Denise. We needed to protect ourselves from any legal or physical retaliation. The attorney advised sending the dossier simultaneously to the state attorney general, a major metropolitan newspaper, and the FBI. Within days, the tide turned. Headlines blazed. Holloway scandal. Town officials under investigation. Long-buried conspiracy unearthed by local historian. Harold Fenwick was arrested at his estate, handcuffed in front of the marble columns he once claimed as trophies. Councilman Bates resigned amid protests from townspeople who felt betrayed. Investigators unearthed more evidence, offshore accounts, secret property transfers, and detailed plans to seize Holloway land once Clara was declared a runaway. The town of Marlowe's Edge convulsed with shock. In the town square, a memorial plaque for Clara was unveiled, in memory of Clara Holloway, whose courage lit the path to justice. I pressed my hand against the cold bronze, tears stinging my eyes. Clara had been vindicated at last. But my relief was shadowed by unease. The night after the arrests, I received an unmarked package on my doorstep. Inside, a single Polaroid photo, me in the boathouse, flashing my light into the darkness, oblivious to the figure watching me from the rafters. On the back, in scrawled ink, "Be careful who you trust." Clara's journal concluded with a warning that I now understood all too well. Those who wield power will do anything to protect it. Though Fenwick and Bates were behind bars, their network ran deep. It could resurface, seeking revenge. I resolved to stay vigilant. I hired a security consultant, changed my routines, and kept copies of every document in a bank-safe deposit box. The knowledge I carried was both weapon and shield. Months have passed, and the dust has settled on the scandal that nearly consumed this town. Marlowe's Edge has begun to heal. The Holloway estate, once a decaying relic, is being restored as a community center and local history museum. In homage to Clara's legacy, I remain the caretaker of her journal and the keeper of her truth. Each night, I place a fresh rose on her memorial plaque, a quiet promise that her voice will never be silenced again. She didn't disappear, she went into hiding to expose a conspiracy that would have destroyed her. And now, because I found her journal hidden beneath my floorboards, her story has been told. Every so often, I walk the riverbank at twilight, listening to the hush of water against the reeds. In the drifting mist, I almost hear Clara's voice whisper on the breeze, "Thank you for finding me." I whisper back into the dusk, "Thank you for showing me the way." Because sometimes, the greatest revelations lie buried in the places we least expect, waiting for someone brave enough to unearth them and bold enough to bear the dangerous truth.